The Aryan Brothers crashed the wedding. When the best man stood up, the shooters ran terrified. The summer heat pressed down on the parking lot outside St. Mary's Cathedral in Sacramento like a heavy blanket. Inside, white ribbons and roses decorated every pew, and the stained glass windows filtered colored light across the assembled guests. Marcus Sullivan adjusted his tie one last time as he watched his younger sister, Danielle, walk down the aisle in her flowing white dress. She looked radiant, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her smile bright enough to light up the entire church. Their mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue in the front row, and Marcus felt his own throat tighten with emotion. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. Danielle's fiancé Ryan was a good man, an engineer who worked for the city, steady and kind. Marcus had vetted him thoroughly when they first started dating 3 years ago. Old habits died hard. Ryan passed every test, and more importantly, he loved Danielle with a devotion that reminded Marcus why he'd spent the last 15 years trying to protect her from the life he'd once lived. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Now let's continue. The reception was held at a hotel ballroom downtown, with cream-colored tablecloths and centerpieces of white lilies. Marcus stood near the head table, greeting guests as they filtered in from the ceremony. He'd just finished talking to his uncle when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. 3 motorcycles pulling into the parking lot, visible through the glass doors. He recognized the insignia immediately: lightning bolts and Germanic crosses, Aryan Brotherhood. Marcus's jaw tightened. He hadn't seen those patches in over a decade, not since he'd walked away from that world. He'd been young and stupid back then, recruited at 19 while doing a short stint in county jail for assault. The Brotherhood had seemed like protection, like family. It took him 5 years to realize they were poison, and another 3 to extract himself completely. He'd moved to Northern California, kept his head down and rebuilt his life from scratch. He thought he'd left all of that behind. The ballroom doors burst open with a crash that silenced the conversations and stopped the jazz quartet mid-song. 3 men walked in, their leather vests displaying the unmistakable patches of the Aryan Brotherhood. They were big, tattooed, and radiated menace. The leader, a bald man with a scar running down his left cheek, scanned the room with cold blue eyes until he found what he was looking for. "There he is," the man said, pointing directly at Ryan. "The groom who thinks he can just walk away." Danielle's face went pale. Ryan stood up, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Tommy, I told you I'm done. I paid what I owed. We're square." Marcus's mind raced. Ryan had history with the Brotherhood. His sister's husband had hidden this from everyone, including him. The revelation stung, but there was no time to process it now. The 3 gang members were advancing toward the head table, and guests were scrambling backward, women grabbing their children, men pulling their families toward the exits. Tommy laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Square? You don't get to decide when you're square, Ryan. You testified, man. You put one of our brothers away for 15 years. Did you really think we'd forget?" One of Tommy's companions, a younger man with a spider web tattoo covering his neck, pulled a handgun from his waistband. The other did the same. Screams erupted throughout the ballroom. Marcus saw his mother trying to shield Danielle, saw the terror in his sister's eyes, and felt something old and familiar ignite in his chest. Not fear, but cold, calculated focus. Marcus stepped forward, moving between the gunman and the head table. "That's far enough." Tommy's attention shifted to him, and recognition flickered across his scarred face. "Well, well, Marcus Sullivan. Shadow, right? That's what they used to call you inside." His grin widened. "You've been off the radar for a long time, brother. Thought you were dead." "Not your brother," Marcus said quietly. His voice carried an edge that made the younger gunmen glance at each other uncertainly. "And I walked away clean. Paid my debts. Did my time." "Different situation," Tommy said, gesturing with his chin toward Ryan. "Your brother-in-law here is a rat. We don't let rats live happy lives." Marcus didn't move, but his presence seemed to fill the space. At 6'3", with broad shoulders and scars earned in places that didn't keep official records, he looked like exactly what he'd once been. Someone you didn't cross lightly. But it wasn't just his physical presence that made the gunman hesitate. It was something else, something in his eyes that spoke of experiences that went beyond street-level gang violence. "Ryan made a mistake," Marcus said. "He was trying to protect someone. I know the whole story now, and if you knew it, you'd understand." "Don't care about his reasons," Tommy spat. "You should." Marcus took another step forward, his hands loose at his sides, because the man he testified against was running a human trafficking ring out of the Brotherhood's clubhouse. Kids, Tommy. 12 and 13-year-olds. Ryan's testimony didn't just put away one of yours. It exposed something that would have brought federal heat down on the entire organization. He did you a favor, even if you're too stupid to see it. The revelation hung in the air. Tommy's face darkened with confusion and anger. We don't... Check your facts, Marcus interrupted. Dennis Kruger. Ring a bell? He's doing 25 to life in Pelican Bay for human trafficking. The Brotherhood officially disavowed him after the trial, claimed he was acting alone. You were in county when it all went down, weren't you, Tommy? They didn't tell you the whole story. They sent you here on bad information. The younger gunman with the spider web tattoo lowered his weapon slightly, uncertainty creeping into his expression. "Tommy, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Jake," Tommy snapped, but his confidence was cracking. Marcus pressed his advantage. "I still have connections, Tommy. People who know people. One phone call from me and your name goes on a list you don't want to be on. Not from the Brotherhood, from people who make the Brotherhood look like a Boy Scout troop. People I worked with after I left the life, people who handle things the federal government doesn't want on the books." It was a calculated bluff, but only partially. Marcus had indeed worked as a consultant for a private security firm that occasionally contracted with federal agencies. He'd helped train operatives in counterinsurgency tactics, drawing on knowledge he'd gained during a deployment to Afghanistan that predated his gang involvement. That military service was what had eventually saved him, given him a path out of the Brotherhood and into legitimate work. The connections he'd made were real, even if his current ability to mobilize them was exaggerated. Tommy stared at Marcus, trying to gauge whether he was telling the truth. The scar on his cheek twitched. "You're bluffing. Am I?" Marcus pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness, holding it up. "I've got a number in here for a man named Erickson, former Delta Force, now runs a private military company. He owes me for something that happened in Kandahar. You really want me to make that call?" The ballroom was silent except for someone's quiet sobbing and the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus could see the calculations running behind Tommy's eyes, the risk assessment, the uncertainty, the dawning realization that he might be in over his head. Ryan spoke up from behind Marcus, his voice shaking but clear. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Kruger was trafficking kids to buyers across state lines. I saw the ledgers. I couldn't live with that. I didn't know he was one of yours until after I'd already talked to the FBI." Tommy's gun wavered. "If what you're saying is true—" "It's true," Marcus said firmly. "Call your shot caller. Ask about Dennis Kruger. Ask why the organization cut him loose. You're here on bad intel, and you're about to make a mistake that'll cost you everything." The three gang members stood frozen in a tableau of confusion and recalculation. The other guests remained pressed against the walls, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Danielle clutched their mother's hand, her wedding dress now crumpled and stained with spilled champagne from the chaos. Finally, Tommy lowered his weapon. "This doesn't feel right." "It's not," Marcus agreed. "Walk away. Check your facts. If I'm lying, you know where to find Ryan, but I'm not lying, and when you confirm what I'm telling you, you're going to realize you almost started a war over nothing." The tension stretched taut as a wire, one wrong word away from snapping into violence. Then Jake, the younger gunman, holstered his weapon. "Come on, Tommy. Let's go make some calls. If he's telling the truth, we look like idiots. If he's lying, we can come back." Tommy's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. He kept his gun out but pointed at the floor. "This isn't over," he said, but the conviction had drained from his voice. "Yeah, it is," Marcus replied. "Walk away while you still can." The three gang members backed toward the door, keeping their eyes on Marcus until they reached the exit. The motorcycles roared to life outside, and within seconds, the sound faded into the distance. The ballroom erupted into chaos, people crying, calling the police, checking on each other. Marcus turned to find Danielle staring at him with wide eyes, a mixture of gratitude and confusion on her face. Ryan looked pale and shaken, his perfect wedding day transformed into a nightmare. "Marcus," Danielle whispered, "what just happened? Who were those people and what did they mean about you?" Marcus felt the weight of his past settling back onto his shoulders like an old coat he'd tried to throw away. He'd built a new life, become someone different, but the old life had a way of catching up, of refusing to stay buried. He put his hand on his sister's shoulder, meeting her questioning gaze. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "All of us. But first, let's get everyone to safety and deal with the police." The police arrived within minutes, taking statements and securing the scene. Marcus gave them a carefully edited version of events, leaving out the specifics of his past, but providing enough information to be useful. The officers seemed satisfied, though one detective, a weathered man in his 50s named Harrison, gave Marcus a long, assessing look before handing him a business card. "If you remember anything else," Harrison said meaningfully, "give me a call." As the evening finally wound down and the guests were released, Marcus found himself alone with Danielle, Ryan, and his mother in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. The devastation on his sister's face hurt worse than any physical blow he'd ever taken. "I'm so sorry," Ryan began, but Marcus held up a hand. "First, the truth. All of it. Then we figure out what comes next." Ryan took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he spoke. "I worked at a shipping company 5 years ago before I got my degree. Dennis Kruger ran a transportation business that contracted with us. I was doing inventory one night and found a shipping container that wasn't on any of the manifests. I opened it to see what was inside." His voice cracked. "There were kids in there, locked in cages, terrified. I couldn't let it go. I went straight to the FBI." Marcus's mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Danielle's eyes filled with tears, not of betrayal, but of understanding. "I had to testify in grand jury proceedings," Ryan continued. "They put me in a witness protection program for 6 months. By the time the trial happened, Kruger had been kicked out of the Brotherhood because the investigation was threatening to bring down the whole organization. I thought it was over. I thought I was safe." He looked at Danielle with anguish. "I never imagined they'd come after me at our wedding. I swear I thought that part of my life was behind me." Marcus studied Ryan's face, looking for deception, but found only genuine remorse and fear. The man had done the right thing in an impossible situation. He'd saved lives, probably dozens of them. The Brotherhood had sent Tommy on a personal vendetta, not an official hit, which meant there was still a chance to resolve this without more violence. "Okay," Marcus said finally. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to make some calls, confirm my read on the situation. If Tommy was acting on his own, we can contain this. If it's an official order, we've got bigger problems." "Marcus, who are you?" Danielle asked, her voice small. "I mean, I know you're my brother, but those men were terrified of you. What did you do?" He met her eyes, seeing the little girl he'd protected all through their childhood, the teenager he'd worked 3 jobs to help through college, the woman who'd stood by him even when he'd made terrible mistakes. She deserved the truth. "I made some very bad choices when I was younger," he said quietly. "Got involved with people I shouldn't have. Did things I'm not proud of. But I got out, and I've been trying to make up for it ever since. The connections I mentioned, they're real. I worked in the military, then in private security. I know people who specialize in making problems disappear." "Are we in danger?" his mother asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Not if I handle this right," Marcus assured her. "Tommy will make his calls, confirm what I told him, and realize he made a mistake. The Brotherhood doesn't like loose cannons. If he pushed this after being told to stand down, they'll deal with him themselves." The reality of the situation settled over them like a heavy fog. Danielle's perfect wedding had been destroyed, not by some random act of violence, but by the consequences of doing the right thing. Ryan had saved children from unimaginable horror, and now he was paying the price. "What do we do now?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus looked at each of them in turn, his mother, his sister, his brother-in-law. Family. the only thing that had ever truly mattered to him. He'd walked through fire to protect them before, and he'd do it again. "We wait," he said, "and we prepare. But Ryan, you need to understand something. The life you thought you'd left behind, it's not gone, it's just sleeping, and we need to make sure it stays that way." As they sat together in the quiet lobby, the sounds of the city filtering in through the glass doors, Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling over him. He'd tried to escape his past, tried to build something clean and pure, but the world didn't work that way. The past always came calling, and when it did, you had to be ready to face it. The wedding was ruined, but his family was alive. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, and Marcus would face them the same way he'd faced everything else, with calculated precision and an unwavering commitment to protecting the people he loved, no matter what it cost him. 3 days after the wedding disaster, Marcus sat in a coffee shop in downtown Sacramento watching the door. He'd made his calls, pulled in favors, and confirmed what he'd suspected. Tommy had been acting on bad information, pursuing a personal grudge rather than following orders from the Brotherhood's leadership. The organization had officially distanced itself from Dennis Kruger years ago, and Tommy's attempt to exact revenge on Ryan had violated their agreement with federal authorities to stay away from anything related to the trafficking case. A man in his 60s entered the coffee shop, his grey hair cropped short, his bearing unmistakably military. Colonel James Erickson, retired Delta Force and current CEO of Sentinel Solutions, a private military contractor that worked with everyone from Fortune 500 companies to alphabet agencies that didn't officially exist. Marcus had saved his life in Kandahar when an operation went sideways, and Erickson was the kind of man who remembered his debts. "Shadow," Erickson said, using Marcus's old call sign as he sat down across from him. "It's been a while." "So I appreciate you coming on short notice," Marcus replied. Erickson waved a hand dismissively. "You saved my ass when that IED took out our convoy. Far as I'm concerned, you've got unlimited credit." He leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes assessing. "So, what's the situation?" Marcus laid out everything: Ryan's testimony, the crashed wedding, Tommy's threats, the Brotherhood's involvement. Erickson listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. When Marcus finished, Erickson was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah, it's me. I need a favor. Aryan Brotherhood, Northern California chapter. There's a guy named Tommy, last name probably Mitchell or Morrison, mid-30s, scar on his left cheek. He threatened a federal witness named Ryan Chambers at a wedding 3 days ago. The Bureau might want to know about that." He paused, listening. "Yeah, I thought they might. Okay, thanks." He hung up and looked at Marcus. "Done. The FBI has been watching the Brotherhood for parole violations. Tommy just gave them probable cause for a search warrant. He'll be back in lockup by tomorrow, probably facing charges for witness intimidation. The Brotherhood's leadership will throw him under the bus to protect their own interests." Marcus felt tension. He didn't know he'd been carrying drain from his shoulders. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Erickson confirmed. "Your brother-in-law did a brave thing testifying against Kruger. The Bureau takes care of witnesses who help take down trafficking operations. They were probably already monitoring the situation, just waiting for someone to make a move." He paused. "You know, we could use someone with your skills at Sentinel. The work pays well, it's legitimate, and you'd be doing good in the world. Think about it." Marcus shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm done with that life. I run a construction company now, build things instead of breaking them." "Fair enough," Erickson said, standing up. "But if you ever change your mind, the door's open. And Marcus, you did good here. Protected your family without anyone getting hurt. That's the mark of a man who's learned from his mistakes." After Erickson left, Marcus sat alone with his coffee, watching people walk past the window. Normal people with normal lives, unaware of the violence that lurked just beneath the surface of civilization. He'd been one of them once, before prison, before the Brotherhood, before Afghanistan. Maybe he could be again. His phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. "Ryan and I are going on our honeymoon after all, 2 weeks in Italy. Thank you for everything, big brother. I love you. Marcus smiled, typing back, be safe. Enjoy every moment. You deserve it. He meant it. Despite everything that had happened, despite the chaos and fear, his sister had married a good man who'd made a hard choice to do the right thing. That was worth protecting. That was worth fighting for. Over the next 2 weeks, life slowly returned to normal. Tommy was arrested on outstanding warrants and charged with witness intimidation. The FBI quietly assured Ryan that the threat had been neutralized, and the Brotherhood's leadership issued a directive to leave him alone, not out of mercy, but out of self-preservation. The last thing they wanted was more federal attention. Marcus threw himself back into his work, spending long days at construction sites, losing himself in the simple satisfaction of building something solid and permanent. But the nights were harder. He'd lie awake, thinking about the look in Tommy's eyes when he'd realized Marcus wasn't bluffing, thinking about how close everything had come to falling apart. His mother visited him one evening at his apartment, bringing homemade lasagna and a bottle of wine. They ate in comfortable silence for a while before she spoke. You protected us, she said quietly. Again. You've been protecting us since your father died. Marcus looked down at his plate. His father had been killed in a car accident when Marcus was 17 and Danielle was 12. He'd stepped into the role of man of the house overnight, taking on responsibility that no teenager should have to bear. It had shaped him, hardened him, set him on a path that led to both his greatest mistakes and his greatest strengths. I'm your mother, she continued. I should have been protecting you. I should have seen that you were drowning under all that pressure. Maybe then you wouldn't have— Don't, Marcus interrupted gently. I made my own choices. Bad ones. But I learned from them and I got out. That's what matters. She reached across the table and took his hand. I'm proud of you. I know I don't say it enough, but I am. You've become a good man despite everything. The words hit harder than he expected. He'd spent so many years trying to earn redemption, trying to prove he was more than his worst mistakes. Hearing his mother say she was proud of him felt like absolution. Thanks, Mom, he said, his voice rough with emotion. They finished dinner, and she left with promises to visit again soon. Marcus cleaned up, then stood at his window looking out at the city lights. Sacramento spread out before him, a maze of streets and stories, each light representing a life, a family, a struggle. He'd been part of the darkness once, had contributed to the fear and violence. But he'd also learned that redemption wasn't a destination, it was a daily choice, a commitment to be better than you were yesterday. When Danielle and Ryan returned from their honeymoon, tanned and happy, Marcus met them for dinner at a quiet restaurant. They showed him pictures of the Colosseum, the Amalfi Coast, the canals of Venice. Ryan seemed more relaxed than Marcus had ever seen him. The weight of fear finally lifted from his shoulders. We've been talking, Danielle said, glancing at her husband, about everything that happened, and we want you to know that we understand why you did what you did, how you lived before. Sometimes good people have to do hard things in bad situations. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I made mistakes. We all make mistakes, Ryan interrupted. But you saved our lives. You stood between us and those guns without hesitation. That's who you are now, and that's what matters. They raised their glasses in a toast, to family, to second chances, to the future. Marcus clinked his glass against theirs, feeling something shift inside him. Maybe he'd been holding onto his guilt too tightly, using it as armor against hope. Maybe it was time to let himself believe that he really had changed, that the man he'd become was worthy of forgiveness. 6 months later, Marcus was at a construction site when he got a call from Detective Harrison, the cop who'd given him his card at the wedding. His stomach tightened with old instincts. Calls from police were rarely good news. Mr. Sullivan, this is Detective Harrison. Got a minute? What's this about? Marcus asked cautiously. Wanted to update you on Tommy Mitchell. He pleaded out on the witness intimidation charges. Got 18 months. But here's the interesting part. He started cooperating with the FBI, giving them information on Brotherhood operations. Turns out your information about Dennis Kruger was the tip of the iceberg. The organization had been turning a blind eye to all kinds of illegal activity. Marcus processed this. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Mitchell specifically mentioned you, said you could have killed him that day at the wedding, but you gave him a way out instead. Said you treated him with more respect than his own people ever did. He asked me to pass along a message. Thank you." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his truck for a long time, watching his crew work on framing a new house. The structure was taking shape, walls rising from the foundation, a space that would soon become someone's home. It was honest work, work that built instead of destroyed. His phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. "Dinner at our place Sunday. I have news to share." Marcus smiled, typing back a confirmation. Life moved forward, bringing new challenges and new joys. The past couldn't be erased, but it could be learned from, grown from, transformed into something useful. That Sunday, Danielle made the announcement over dinner. She was pregnant. Marcus was going to be an uncle. He hugged his sister, feeling tears prick at his eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. A new life, a new generation, a chance to show them a better way. "Uncle Marcus," Ryan said with a grin, "has a nice ring to it." "Uncle Marcus," he repeated, testing the words. They felt good. They felt right. As he drove home that night, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here, from lost teenager to gang member to soldier to the man he was now. Every choice, every mistake, every act of courage or cowardice had led to this moment. He couldn't change the past, but he could choose how it shaped his future. The Aryan Brotherhood had crashed the wedding intending to destroy, but they'd inadvertently given Marcus something precious, proof that he really had changed, that the man he'd become could stand up to the man he'd been and win, not with violence, but with wisdom gained from hard experience. He thought about his future niece or nephew, about the world they'd grow up in, about the stories they'd hear about their Uncle Marcus. He wanted them to know that people could change, that mistakes didn't define you unless you let them, that standing up for what's right sometimes meant facing down your own demons. The city lights blurred past his window as he drove, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years: genuine peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. He'd found his way through the darkness, and now he could help light the way for others. The wedding had been crashed, but the marriage survived. The shooters had come, but they'd left without firing a shot. And in the end, everyone involved had learned something about courage, redemption, and the power of choosing to be better than your worst moments. Marcus Sullivan, once known as Shadow in the dark corners of the criminal world, had finally stepped fully into the light, and it felt like coming home.